The Florida Gators hiring Lane Kiffin would be hiring the best available candidate.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free, whether it's in the podcast and on YouTube. I am Brandon Olson. Happy Thursday. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So download the app today. And look, I know that there's going to be a ton of talk about Lane Kiffin, right? We're not going to stop that here because I believe Lane Kiffin is the best candidate, and the Florida Gators hiring him would mean that they did what everybody wants to do, right? And this is, before we even talk too much about Lane, this is kind of revisiting the Billy Napier hire, right? When that was Scott Strickland's number one candidate. That was the only one he really looked into, but that was his number one candidate, and he went and he got his guy. It's the same thing when you talk about the NFL draft, and it's like, yeah, there's these options, but that's our number one. We're going to get that guy, and whether or not it works out or not, in hindsight, you can judge it, but at the moment, you go, who's the number one candidate? Who's the number one guy that you want? Who's the number one guy you look for? And if you get that guy, then you live with the results, right? That's the way I look at it, at least, right? Where I disagree that Napier should have been the number one guy, but he was. And that's a flaw in the process. That doesn't mean that like the result didn't work, but that was a flaw in the process to say, hey, this is our number one guy, and we're not doing due diligence on anybody else. Lane Kiffin is the number one guy right now, should be the number one guy right now. I feel like Lane Kiffin, even if you went, hey, the University of Florida, that job's open. Every coach is available. Who should be number one? I feel like a lot of people would say Lane Kiffin, right? I think I'd say Lane Kiffin for talking about Florida, honestly. It doesn't mean that I think he's the best coach on the planet. It means that I think he might be the best coach for Florida, and he is available. And I know that on Sunday when Billy Napier got fired, we spoke about the tiers, right? I didn't do a coaching list per se, as in like 1, 2, 3, 4. I broke it down into coaching tiers. And for me, tier 1 was a guy where if he comes in, you immediately expect to be in the college football playoff next year, and you think he's good enough to keep the roster intact. I had 4 names in that tier. Lane Kiffin was the first one I wrote down because he was the most obvious one that I was like, well, he should be at Florida, right? He fits. We'll talk about the fit. We'll talk about everything. But Lane should have been the first guy brought up. Lane was the guy that when Dan Mullen got fired, a lot of people went, hey, Lane Kiffin should be your guy there. Lane was the guy where in 2024, when we first started talking about firing Billy truly, it was like, hey, Lane Kiffin might be the guy. And then the 2024 season finished. Billy got his vote of confidence to come back for 2025. And once Billy screwed up in 2025, everybody went, hey, Lane Kiffin. This kind of feels like one of those things where it's like, oh, just we're going to constantly bring up Lane and it might never happen, right? And it might not. But he is, and I think this is a very unique circumstance where we know that he is at or near the very tippy top of the Florida Gators candidate list from the moment it opened. Honestly, realistically, from before it opened, right? So we know that from that moment, he was at the top of the administration and the boosters list. Hell, we had boosters last year going, I'm ready to hire Lane Kiffin. Let's hire Lane Kiffin. Like we've had that happening. So we know administration, Lane Kiffin. Boosters, Lane Kiffin. And I'm not saying that they're always number one, that he's always number one on those lists. I'm saying that if you told them, hey, 3 candidates, he's going to be in that top 3 for everybody. So administration, Lane Kiffin. Boosters, Lane Kiffin. You ask the fan base, you go join a Twitter space that's probably open right now about the Florida Gators. And you just pop in there, grab a mic, request one, go, hey, quick question. Who should be the number one target for the Florida Gators head coaching job? 80% of those Florida Gator fans are going to tell you Lane Kiffin. If you went and asked the players that are going to be here next year or are open to being here next year or considering being here next year, however you want to describe it, you ask those players, hey, which coaching candidate would you want to hire? A lot of them are probably going to say Lane Kiffin. I don't think we've ever seen a time where a head coaching candidate is that pretty much unanimously considered as that should be the guy. Like, I can't think of a single time that's ever happened, and that's incredible. And that is one of the reasons that Lane Kiffin should be number one on this list right now. And I say number one on this list right now because, again, going back to my list, I had 4 names on that list. It was tiered, and tier 1 had 4 names in that. Lane Kiffin was number 1, and again, not ranked, but Lane Kiffin was in tier 1. Marcus Freeman was in tier 1. Dan Lanning was in tier 1, and Curt Cignetti was in tier 1. Okay. Curt Cignetti signed a contract extension before Florida even fired Billy Napier. I will also say, even if he hadn't, from what I was told, wasn't happening anyway. I think that the contract extension was more to protect Indiana from Penn State than it was to protect them from Florida. So Curt Cignetti wasn't happening. Dan Lanning was never happening. It would cost Florida upwards of $100 million to get Dan Lanning. The $21 million to fire Billy. Dan Lanning's buyout is around 20-ish. He's got the stock options that are $30 million in stock, which means to offset the price of those eventually going up, to offset that future price, you're going to have to pay even more than that. You're probably going to have to pay 40, hell, maybe 50 to get on top of that. Pay his assistants, put NIL. You're paying well over $100 million there. And that's paying that over a year. Like that's most of that is going to happen within a year. It's not like you're going, oh yeah, $100 million on a 7-year contract. No, we're talking about spending $100 million in about a year. That wasn't happening, right? Marcus Freeman, similar situation, right? We don't know his exact buyout number, but media reports that it's, potentially $40 million. That it used to be $4 million. He signed that extension in December of 2024. That blew it up. So it could be around $40 million. Again, Florida's not spending that. And I don't even care about the discussion of, well, can you? Because the conversation should go to, should you? And the answer should be no. That's spending, that's investing way too much in a guy in year one. That's investing way too much in a guy to justify that cost. It really is. Like, and I know people don't like to hear that, and people go, raise more money, do this, do that. I don't care. There's a time where you go, all right, that's just not smart. And that would have been just not smart. That means that the only available, and also, by the way, Marcus Freeman, the reports have come out that he wants the Ohio State job whenever that opens. Okay. So that means that there's one available coach from tier 1 left. It's Lane Kiffin, and he's a perfect fit at the University of Florida. We'll talk about that more when we get back with Locked On Gators. One of the tools that help make a huge difference for business owners is Quo, formerly OpenPhone. It's the same great business phone system you've heard me talk about before, just with a new name. And here's why it matters. Every missed call is money left on the table. When a new customer calls and you miss it, that's money lost, right? You don't want to do that. When every customer conversation counts, you need a phone system that keeps you connected 24/7. Quo is the #1 business phone system that streamlines customer communications. It works right through an app on your phone or computer, so no more carrying 2 phones or relying on a landline. You're not Kevin Gates. It's not 1950. You don't have to worry about those. See why over 90,000 businesses trust Quo, formerly OpenPhone. Get started for free and get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockedoncollege. That's quo.com/lockedoncollege. You can even keep your existing number for free. Quo, no missed calls and no missed customers. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. You pick a bet, you put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So, what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free right in the podcast and on YouTube. And I've said multiple times today that Lane Kiffin should be the number one candidate for the Florida Gators. Hiring him would be hiring the best candidate truly. And that's a big plus, honestly. I know like Marcus Freeman, Dan Lanning, Kurt Cignetti are off the table. They are also in tier 1. For some guys or gals, Lane Kiffin wouldn't have been number 1 on the candidate list, right? He might have been behind Freeman, Lanning, Cignetti, whoever. For a lot of people, Lane Kiffin was number 1, regardless of what tier they're in, regardless of who else was available. It was Lane, right? Lane is an awesome fit for Florida. He really is. I know that people bring up, because before we even talk about what people bring up and negating anything, 2 things. One, Ole Miss is not a better job than Florida. It's not even on the same level as Florida, okay? It is well below. Ole Miss fans are taking screenshots of Florida's record over the past 15 years and going, this is what Lane Kiffin would want to go to. This is this great program. It still has and in that screenshot, Florida still has a better record than Ole Miss over that time span. Okay? People can bring that up all they want. Go ahead. You could talk about how, Lane Kiffin is winning 10 plus games per season at Ole Miss. Sure, that's great. His success at Ole Miss is not making Ole Miss a better job than Florida. Ole Miss has a better record because Florida hired the wrong guys and because Ole Miss hired Lane Kiffin. Your AD is doing a better job. Your school is not a better job. Okay? Just want to throw that out there as well. I'm tired of hearing this and seeing this nonsense in my comments, in the live chat, on Twitter. It's ridiculous to see. You got to be delusional to believe that. You really, truly do. Because it's crazy to think. Ole Miss isn't even close to the job that Florida is. Florida is a job where you can win national championships. Ole Miss isn't. It's just not happening. It's really not. And so I think when people talk about that, it's insane to me to hear. You'll hear it later on. We got the squad show that comes out. I decided to join it this week. I'm in Europe right now, so I'm way off the time zone when they record it. I stayed up until 2:30 in the morning to record it with them just so we could talk about this. If Lane Kiffin ever wants to win a national championship, he needs to leave Oxford, Mississippi. He needs to leave Ole Miss. And I said that, and Stephen Willis from Locked On Ole Miss, his response was, well, if it's so easy to win a national championship in Gainesville, why haven't your past 4 coaches done it? And I responded 2 things to that. One, I didn't say it was so easy to win a national championship in Gainesville. So that point is nothing. You're using someone else's opinion against me. And 2, I didn't say Lane Kiffin needs to leave and come to Gainesville. I said if Lane Kiffin ever wants to win a national championship, he needs to leave Oxford. There are plenty of places you can win a national championship. Oxford, Mississippi isn't one of them. It's as simple as that. When we talk about why would Lane Kiffin leave, people bring up money all the time. I don't know how much the money plays into it. The money's nice. I'm sure the money does matter a bit, but I don't know how much money plays into it for Lane Kiffin. If he wants to win a national championship, the opportunity is here, now. And you don't know if it's going to be there again in another 4 years. You don't know where you're going to be in 4 years. You don't know where Florida's going to be in 4 years. You don't know where Auburn, LSU, any job that Lane Kiffin gets tied to, you don't know where that's going to be in 4 years. You know the Florida one is here now. Okay? Like that, we know that. So this, if Lane wants to leave, if Lane wants to win a national championship, he's going to have to leave Oxford because it's not happening in Oxford, Mississippi. It's just not. They don't have the resources or the location to get the kids that they need to win a national championship. Okay? It's as simple as that. Florida's an upgrade for Lane Kiffin if he were to choose that job. And he's a perfect fit for Florida. Like what I was going to say before I even started talking about this was that people mentioned, because when you're talking about hiring a head coach, there's no such thing as a sure thing, right? Especially in modern day football, there's no such thing as a sure thing as a head coach. A guy could be incredibly successful somewhere, change schools, and flame out completely. A guy can be a struggling to keep his job coach, go somewhere with better resources and become a lot better, make a couple changes culturally, philosophically, and be a lot better, right? You don't know. Everything's rolling the die. And for Florida and Lane Kiffin, like Lane Kiffin is not just your safest option as far as who's giving us the highest floor, but also highest ceiling. And I think that for Lane, like that's what, to me, what tier 1 was. Again, it was immediate college football playoff expectations and being able to keep their roster intact. Because that's a big part of it. It's not just about winning. It's about being able to win and keep your current roster intact because you've got a very talented roster right now. And so I think Lane can do that. I truly do. I think Lane can do that. Honestly, I think he could do that better than Marcus Freeman, Dan Lane, or Kurt Signetti could have. And that was one of the reasons that I go, all right, like Lane would be the first name that I would mention when we talk about this job too. Because I think that he can do that. Like he has seriously outperformed expectations with Ole Miss. Like people bring up he's got this record against top 10 teams, this record against top 25 teams, and neither of those numbers are good, right? Personally, I don't give a damn about what his record is against top 10 teams or top 25 teams. Because I give a damn about what his record is when he is facing a team that's on his level talent-wise or higher. Which a lot of those top 10, top 25 teams were higher than his team talent-wise. All right? You're not supposed to win most of those games. You're supposed to lose most of those games. I would argue that Lane's winning percentage against better teams is a better winning percentage than a lot of other coaches are when they have the lesser team. I would argue that Lane Kiffin's winning percentage against teams of equal talent, or generally equal talent, I would argue his winning percentage is probably better than a lot of other coaches that are playing against teams that are level with theirs. That's what I care about. I don't care about what Lane Kiffin's record against top 10 teams is when he's coaching at Ole Miss and he doesn't have a top 10 team. That's not a fair comparison. That's not a one-to-one comparison. I don't care what Lane Kiffin's record is against top 25 teams when I know that he's got the resources to put out a starting lineup and no depth. I don't care what he's doing against these significantly better teams. Like I don't care about how those losses are when he's playing at a disadvantage. I care about what he's doing when it matters. I care about what he's doing when he's on a level playing field, because if he comes to the University of Florida, he's going to be on a level playing field with just about anybody. So I don't care what he's doing as the lesser team overall in the grand scheme of things, in the grand picture, however you want to describe it. I don't care about that grand picture. I care about what it looks like when he's facing teams on his level, because if he's at the University of Florida, he's going to have teams he's going to have teams under him that are on that level of every team in the country. That's what I care about. I care about how good of a coach he is, not what the record says when he's at Ole Miss, where they've got a team bashing everyone and their student section can't even show up to games to the point where he's going to complain about it publicly. Oh yeah, great job at Ole Miss, right? That's what every coach dreams of. Delusional. We're talking more about Lane Kiffin and the University of Florida when we get back with Locked On Gators. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride. With more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else, you can feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail. From the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery, you can make everyday drives feel like anything but. From smooth handling to intuitive controls. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Thanks again for Locked On Gators, your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free with us in the podcast and on YouTube. And to wrap up today's show, we are still talking about Lane Kiffin at Florida and why he'd be the best hire. And I wanted to take this time to address some of the questions surrounding Lane, right? Because like I mentioned, every coach is a risk. Every coach has their pros and cons, and every coach has to fit in properly. And you don't know how every coach is going to work. You don't know how everything's going to play out. I think that's all fair. True, like there are questions surrounding Lane, and you should ask those questions. If you ask someone a question and they can't defend their stance, then their stance doesn't matter. So when you ask about Lane, you say, okay, well, what about the record versus top 10 and top 25 teams? And you say, okay, that's fine. That's fine having that record versus top 10 and top 25 teams. What is his record against teams that are on his playing field? And what is his winning percentage compared to other coaches that don't have top 10, top 25 teams and are facing top 10, top 25 teams? That's the comparison that matters. Not just the overall record, not that blanket, shallow statement. No, you got to go in depth with this stuff. You're hiring a football coach. It's not just nonsense. This isn't Madden. Like you need to hire a football coach that can make things work, and you need to have someone that can prove themselves. That's what he's trying to do. I mentioned earlier, like I don't think Lane has the resources to build a truly competitive full-time roster. And I think you see that with his teams, right? I think you see 2024 was probably the best team he's ever had, right? It still had depth issues. It had quarterback, it had receiver, it had D-line, and at least starting DBs, right? Had some guys at linebacker, had a few talented offensive linemen there. But like, I feel like you look at the top 15, 20 names in his starting lineup, or you look at the top 15, 20 names on the roster in terms of talent by whatever metric you want to use, college football 26 overall ranking, I don't care. You look at the top like 15, 20 to 25 guys, and it's like, oh, that's a lot of good football players. And then you look at slightly below that, and it's like, oh, we have no idea what's going on back there. He hasn't been able to build a full roster. And I get it. He's someone that likes the portal, loves the portal. It's guys, you're going in to get guys that are already developed. That doesn't need to be your focal point. That's cool, sure. I think that in an ideal world, Lane Kiffin would have that same portal approach, but also bring in a more talented high school class. And I think that the University of Florida, hell, I think LSU, hell, I think Auburn, all give you better chances to do that than Ole Miss does. Okay? I mentioned this yesterday when we went live for like 45 minutes, which, by the way, subscribe. We're going to be going live at random times. But I mentioned that when we were talking about the in-state talent. And, you know, we were in Twitter Spaces the other day, and someone was talking about LSU having like talent per capita. And it's like, well, you're saying per capita because you don't have the quantity there. Like that's what you say per capita when you don't have the volume. If you have the volume, you don't need to use per capita. So yes, LSU has 10 blue chips this year, last year, whatever. The state of Florida, the state of Texas have 40 plus. Even if you're not getting the top at the top in your state, you're still getting damn talented football players in your state. That matters. You're winning games in Florida, you're going to get a lot of guys that are top of the top of your state. And those could be your depth guys while you keep your portal approach. Go ahead. Your floor raises significantly and your ceiling raises because you're going to have guys that if they pop, if they hit, if they're a good pick, if they're a good pickup, they're going to become immediate contributors and big time starters. You're going to take a guy with a really high ceiling. If he hits, and you skyrocket. That matters. He doesn't have a quality roster with the depth. He's got quality starters. And then once things start coming downhill, they go down. Simple as that. So I do think that Florida being there, again, LSU, Auburn, I'm talking Florida because this is Locked On Gators, but I think there are a lot of options that give you better chances to win a national championship if you're Lane Kiffin, if you care about that, than Ole Miss does. People talk about his defense, right? They talk about Lane not prioritizing defense. They talk about the defense gave up 43 points to Georgia this past weekend. They'll talk about, a billion things, right? But here's the thing. Again, I understand this year's defense is not last year's defense. I don't think he doesn't care about defense. I still think Pete Golding's a good DC. Simple as that. I really do. I think they don't have the talent right now on defense, but I think that's a resource thing more than anything else. But I still think they have a good DC. And people could disagree. I know that there's a lot of people that are going to disagree strictly based off of, well, at Alabama, people hated him. At Alabama, people said he stunk. I don't care. Cut the film on. Look what they do schematically. I'm cool with it. Like I like what Pete Golding does defensively, which also isn't a shock because I've been very open. I like what Ron Roberts does schematically. Pete Golding is a Ron Roberts guy. He's part of the Ron Roberts tree. It's not a big tree, but Pete Golding is part of that tree. And so I honestly, I'm fine with Pete Golding. I'd prefer maybe going to get someone bigger, but I'm fine with Pete Golding. I think Pete Golding's a good DC. And I've said before, I think Lane Kiffin hiring Pete Golding was the moment where I was like, okay, he might actually be serious about this stuff right now. To me, that mattered. They've invested in the defensive line a lot. They've invested in the secondary. This isn't a guy that doesn't care about defense anymore. This is just like, I'm just going to put up points. We're going to have fun with it. This is a guy that has invested. Will it work out? Maybe, maybe not. I mentioned when I was talking with Stephen Willis on the Squad Show, he was just like, oh, why didn't Dan Mullen work out? He was a fun offensive guy. And I said, Dan Mullen quit. And he said, how do you know Lane Kiffin won't quit? And I said, I don't know. But I'm not going to not hire a guy because I don't know how he's going to deal long-term with things. If you can coach at Ole Miss for more than half a decade and not quit, I don't know what the hell Florida's going to do to make you quit. There's more pressure, more expectations, of course, but you got a lot more resources because it's a better job. Lane Kiffin should be the Florida Gators' #1 priority. No doubt in my mind about it. Okay? Make that abundantly clear and don't forget it. Lane Kiffin should be the #1 priority for the Florida Gators. I'm not saying that it's Lane or bust. I'm not doing that. I am very open to a lot of names. Like I've said, this is all like there's risk accounting to all of them. There's risk involved with all of them. I think Lane is the safest guy with the highest ceiling. And I think that's what makes him #1. Simple as that. That's all it is for me. It's math. It's math. I'm a nerd. It's fine. That's what it comes down to. That's what it comes down to for me, though. Lane Kiffin, priority #1, University of Florida. Even if the other names are still available, he'd probably still be deserving of priority #1. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free reviews in the podcast and on YouTube. We will be back maybe later today. We might go live again. Who knows? We'll be back tomorrow at the absolute latest with Locked On Gators. I am Brandon Olson, and I will see you all next time.